Grace! Is that you, Grace?
Returning home after 4 months away, I found my daughter Grace in a shocking state in the dark bathroom. I had been staying at my parents' house in the countryside to help them out for a while. Grace's once prized long black hair was scattered all over the bathroom floor, and her thin, drenched body was clad in clinging wet clothes. I stepped into the cramped bathroom and shook her shoulders as she looked utterly exhausted.
Grace! Are you okay? What on earth happened?
She slowly looked at my face as if coming back to her senses.
Mom? What?
Feeling relieved, Grace began to wail loudly. Looking closely, I saw that her hair had not only been cut with scissors, but also shaved with clippers. Horrified by the sight, I hugged her tightly. Grace was supposed to be getting married soon. As she gradually calmed down, she started to explain bit by bit. It was my sister and Dad who did this. I had suspected as much, but it was still a shock to hear that my husband Gavin had been involved. I think they planned it. They wanted to ruin my wedding. They told me to call off the engagement within the 5 days they'd be away.
Unforgivable.
Desperately trying to contain my urge to scream, I called Gavin to ascertain the truth.
Hello.
Oh, what's up? We're at the airport now. Going on a 4-night, 5-day trip. We're gonna eat lots of delicious food. After what he did to Grace, Gavin spoke nonchalantly as if nothing had happened. No, he sounded downright cheerful. I had initially called intending to yell at him, but Gavin's attitude made me change my mind.
Did something happen? Our flight's soon, so if you need anything, just email me. Oh, and since we want to fully enjoy this family trip, don't contact us while we're away. All right, gotta go.
With that, he hung up. At that moment, I felt like all my love, trust, and bonds with him had been severed. Grace, this house holds memories of your dad. Is it okay if I let it go? Grace gave a small nod at my murmur. I will never forgive those who hurt her. I immediately began preparations to send them to hell, and Grace and I left the house. I'm Hannah, 51 years old. I have a husband and 2 daughters in our family of 4. My older daughter Isabel is 33 and got married 6 years ago. She lives out of state. My younger daughter Grace, at 25, seems to have found someone she wants to marry. Hearing just that, we might sound like a typical family, but ours is a blended family where we remarried with kids from previous marriages. And currently, we're facing a problem most normal families don't have. I lost my previous husband in a car accident when I was 28. It happened so suddenly that everything went dark before my eyes. I couldn't do anything but cry and cry. The night of the funeral, as I lay in bed overcome with shock, my mom told me sternly,
Hannah, get a hold of yourself.
Her words made me feel like I had come back to my senses. Consumed by grief over losing my husband, I had lost the capacity to think about Grace. We'll support you. You need to take good care of Grace. That's something only you can do as her mother. Tears welled up in my eyes. Thinking of my husband, who had to leave behind 2-year-old Grace, I felt like my heart would shatter. But a different kind of strength than before had taken root within me. From now on, I'll protect Grace by myself. That resolve seemed to make me stronger. Why don't you come back home once you've settled down? I appreciated my mom's concerned suggestion, but I had no intention of going back. Thank you. But this house is something he left for me. The house the 3 of us lived in was the home my husband and I had bought together right after we got married. After he passed away, the loan was paid off by the insurance, so I just couldn't bring myself to leave it. It'll be all right. I'm sure you'll manage somehow. My mom respected my choice and came out from the countryside to stay by my side and support me for about half a year. I think I was able to get back on my feet much sooner than expected thanks to my mom. I met my current husband Gavin at a part-time job I started working at after becoming a single mother. It was a small company with only about 15 employees, so everyone was close and it had a homey atmosphere. Among them, Gavin, who was also single and raising a daughter, and I hit it off right away and became good friends. He was a cute, stylish guy with curly hair and round, black-rimmed glasses. My daughter Isabel is in 5th grade, and I guess because I'm a man, I just can't really understand how she feels sometimes. The photo he showed me of his daughter Isabel was of a cute girl with curly hair like her dad's. I have times when my daughter cries asking where her dad is, and I don't know what to do. She's probably jealous seeing dads participating in kindergarten events. Just having someone to listen to our troubles and worries made us both feel a little better, I think. As an extension of our heart-to-hearts, I started accompanying Gavin shopping for his daughter, and he would drive us to the aquarium Grace wanted to go to. We gradually started meeting outside of work more and more. As we helped each other with child-rearing, at some point we had started dating.
Will you marry me? We've only been together a year, but I truly want to support you. I swear to love you, Hannah, along with the memories of your late husband.
Grace was fond of Gavin too, and she got along well with his daughter Isabel, so I had no reason to refuse. At some point, I had also started wishing that Gavin and I could protect our daughters and be happy together. After finishing up the family meetings on both sides, we got married right away and started our life as a family of 4. Gavin and I discussed housing and decided to continue living in the detached house I had been living in. But I felt a little guilty about starting a life with a new family in the house I had lived in with my late husband. I will definitely make Hannah and Grace happy. Perhaps sensing how I felt, Gavin declared that to my late husband's photo. Seeing him do that, I finally felt like I could put my feelings about it to rest. Once we started living together, Grace was so happy to have a big sister that she followed Isabel around constantly. Isabel, let's play together. With an 8-year age gap, it was understandably unreasonable to expect them to play together. For Isabel, a middle schooler, it was basically just babysitting.
Grace, don't be too selfish. Sorry, Isabel.
But even when Grace persistently clung to her, Isabel never seemed annoyed and played along with a smile. The sight of the two of them warmed my heart and made me genuinely feel glad I had remarried. Then one day, at night, while Gavin and I were watching TV, Grace said, "Isabel said my hairstyle is weird." Gavin and I looked at each other. Grace's brown hair was cut straight in a bob haircut. We tried to reassure her saying she means it's cute, but getting laughed at made Grace really hate getting her hair cut in a bob. Tying back her grown-out hair with a rubber band became her signature look, and before I knew it, her hair had grown down to around her chest. But this would later cause a big problem.
Isabel's little sister has such pretty hair.
It started with those words from Isabel's friend who had come over to play. Grace's fair skin and her glossy, straight brown hair took after her father, but when she grew it long, people were drawn to its beauty.
Even though you has curly hair, Isabel.
The friend's innocently thoughtless words mercilessly hurt Isabel, who had entered puberty. Apparently, she was also teased about her curly hair by the boys in her class at school, and Isabel gradually developed an inferiority complex about her own hair and started distancing herself from Grace with her straight hair. About a year after we started living as a family of 4, I came home from shopping and opened the front door to hear Grace's loud, wailing sobs. I hurried to the living room where the sound was coming from. Isabel ran upstairs, and Grace ran to hug me.
Mom! Isabel! Isabel! What? Hold on! Grace, look at me properly!
Rushing over to me, her hair had been cut short on one side and a clump from the top of her head had been chopped off, leaving a bald patch. Young as she was, Grace was still a girl. Of course she would be shocked to have her hair cut like that.
Isabel! Come here right now. What is the meaning of this? Explain yourself.
Blinded by anger, I pounded on Isabel's bedroom door with all my might.
Why would you do something like this? You're in middle school, you should know right from wrong.
I probably would have been just as furious even if Isabel were my own child. When Gavin came home and saw Grace's head, he flew into a rage, dragged Isabel out of her room, and slapped her. Then he forced her to apologize without even listening to her side of the story. It was too much. But that's how terrible a state Grace's hair was in. After calming down and listening to Isabel's reasons, we were disheartened again. We apologized for lashing out in anger and consulted with the school, trying our best to care for Isabel's emotional well-being, but it was too little too late. Isabel started shutting herself in her room at home except for meals, hated when Grace tried to get close to her, and we stopped going out as a family. We tried to talk things out many times, but Isabel never opened up her closed-off heart again. I should have taken her side by myself at least. I must have had plenty of bad experiences with curly hair too, but... Gavin was deeply hurt and bitterly regretted hitting Isabel.
I'm going to commute to high school from Grandpa and Grandma's house.
As soon as she started high school, Isabel moved in with her grandparents and commuted to school from there. Living apart helped Isabel regain her composure and our relationship gradually improved, but she never moved back home until she graduated college. Around the time Isabel got married and moved out of state, and Grace started job hunting. My father-in-law passed away from illness, and we decided to have my mother-in-law Joanna move in with us. The in-laws' house was old and due for renovation soon, so we decided to have her come live with us as is for the time being. For the past decade or so, we'd had our ups and downs with the whole Isabel situation, but I thought Joanna and I had managed to get along decently. But living together made me realize that was a misconception. Within a month of moving in, Joanna started treating me and Grace roughly. She did nothing herself, only nagging and nitpicking. She may have had pent-up dissatisfaction and feelings toward me over the years. Early on, I too felt stressed by Joanna, but I gradually stopped letting it bother me. It's part of my personality that when I start feeling stressed like I'm being made to do this, I switch gears to I'll just do it myself proactively. I'm fine too. I know it makes things easier on Mom when I help out. No matter what Grandma says to me, I've decided to just take the initiative. We'll manage somehow. Those words sum up my approach and outlook on life, but it seems Grace has inherited that too. Somehow it's like looking at myself and I can't help but laugh. Joanna must have been displeased by how unbothered Grace and I were, because next she turned her attention to Gavin. It wasn't overt, but a kind of brainwashing. Then one day, 3 years later, Isabel, who had gotten married and was living out of state, suddenly came back home. It was a divorce due to her partner's infidelity. I got the settlement money from the divorce trial in a lump sum, so it's fine. I'm just lonely suddenly being on my own. Can I move back home? Of course you can. This is your home too, you know. Her divorce was a shock, but Gavin looked a little happy. Once Isabel moved back in with us, our family of 5 started living together and the atmosphere at home gradually turned strange. Joanna and Isabel ganged up on us and started treating me and Grace like housekeepers. Gavin spoiled Isabel, and it was like the house had been divided into opposing sides of 3 versus 2.
Isabel is hurt from the divorce. Indulge her selfishness a bit. This time, I'm going to be Isabel's #1 ally.
I understood how he felt, so even though I knew this couldn't go on, I didn't know what to do about the situation. A while after we started living like this, I got a call from my own parents. Dad had collapsed and was going to be hospitalized for 2 months. Hearing the exhaustion in Mom's voice, I wanted to rush to her side immediately. But thinking of Joanna and Isabel, who did nothing around the house, I grew worried about Grace.
Don't worry about things here, just go to them right away. She's right. If you don't go and something happens, you'll regret it forever, Mom.
Encouraged by Grace's words, I ended up returning to my parents' house, a plane ride away. Initially planning to stay for 2 months, just as Dad was being discharged, Mom's condition worsened, so I had to extend my stay. During that time, I kept in touch with Gavin through email and talked to Grace often on the phone. As expected, Grace was left in charge of all the housework. I tried admonishing Gavin over the phone, but it was no use.
Grace says she's doing it herself, she's not forcing herself to.
I could feel a growing sense of distrust toward Gavin in my heart. We might be reaching our limit soon. Even as I thought that, I agonized over not being able to return home right away. Around the time my parents' health recovered, I received happy news from Grace.
Mom, there's someone I want to marry. I want to introduce him to you. Do you think you can come back next month?
I gripped my smartphone tightly and leaped for joy.
Of course. I'll come back right away for you, Grace. Let me know once the date is set. I'll definitely be back by then.
When I told my parents too, they both seemed to perk up instantly. However, as the day of her fiancé's visit approached and I was preparing to leave my parents' house, I got a call from Gavin.
It seems Grace's fiancé coming over has been postponed to next week or later. What? Is that so? I haven't heard anything about that.
Yeah, she's busy right now it seems.
She asked me to pass along this message for her.
So hold off on contacting her for a while.
I see. Got it.
I was disappointed about the postponement, though I knew it couldn't be helped.
Also, I managed to get some extended time off, so I'm thinking of taking the family on a trip starting Saturday. You stay there a bit longer and be a good daughter until the date is set.
Okay, I'll do that then.
But I'm thinking of coming home soon, so let me know as soon as you find out the date. Yeah. But no need to rush. Even if you come back next week, we won't be here, and Grace seems busy too. Take your time since you're there. Don't push yourself.
Okay. Thanks. I felt uneasy about how he seemed to not want me to come home. It bothered me that the day they were leaving for the trip was the day before Grace's fiancé was supposed to visit, and I couldn't accept that Grace was so busy she had to ask Gavin to contact me. I had a bad feeling, so I decided to go home the very day Gavin and the others left for their trip. Saturday afternoon. Arriving home for the first time in 4 months, the house was dead silent, as if they had already left. But a strange sound could be heard from somewhere.
I'm home.
I called out from the entryway, but no one responded. Leaving my suitcase in the entryway, I quietly entered the house. The living room and kitchen lights were off, and I knocked on Joanna's room but didn't hear a sound. I had an ominous feeling. Realizing what that sound from earlier was, I hurriedly headed toward its source. It was probably the sound of the shower in the bathroom. I resolutely opened the door to the dark bathroom and saw a figure sitting on the floor, leaning against the wall.
What the?
A scream escaped me involuntarily. Timidly turning on the light, I saw Grace there, looking completely transformed. Her once prized long black hair was scattered all over the bathroom floor, and her thin, drenched body was clad in clinging wet clothes.
Grace! Is that you, Grace?
In the bathtub, a cleaning brush and a running shower head had been tossed aside, still making noise. I turned off the faucet, stepped into the cramped bathroom, and shook the shoulders of Grace, who looked utterly exhausted.
Grace! Are you okay? What on earth happened?
Grace slowly looked at my face as if coming back to her senses.
Mom! Wah!
As if relieved, Grace began to wail loudly. Looking closely, I saw that Grace's hair had not only been cut with scissors, but also shaved with clippers. Only some longer hair remained in places like the nape of her neck. Horrified by the sight, I hugged her tightly. As I held her trembling body, I thought back to the past. It's like with Isabel. But she was no longer a small child. I couldn't believe she had her hair cut without being able to resist. But the fact that it actually happened. Unthinkable scenarios dominated my mind. Feeling frustrated and sad, I cried together with Grace as I held her. Even though she was supposed to get married to the person she loved. My heart ached unbearably. Eventually, as Grace calmed down, she slowly started to speak. It was my sister and Dad who did it. I had suspected as much, but hearing it was Gavin was still a shock. While she was cleaning the bath, Gavin suddenly restrained her from behind and Isabel cut her hair. Even if she tried to resist, she couldn't move in the cramped bathroom. Gavin held her in his arms as she was shaved bald. I think they planned it. They had confiscated my phone a while ago. They wanted to ruin my wedding. After cutting Grace's hair, the three of them took their prepared travel bags and left. They told me to call off the engagement within the 5 days they'd be away. Unforgivable. Desperately trying to contain my urge to scream, I called Gavin to ascertain the truth. Hello. Oh, what's up? We're at the airport now. Going on a 4-night, 5-day trip. We're gonna eat lots of delicious food. After what he did to Grace, Gavin spoke nonchalantly as if nothing had happened. No, he sounded downright cheerful. I had initially called intending to yell at him, but Gavin's attitude made me change my mind. I wanted to make his life a living hell. Did something happen? Our flight's soon, so if you need anything, email me. Oh, and since we want to fully enjoy this family trip, don't contact us while we're away. All right, gotta go. With that, he hung up. At that moment, I felt like all my love, trust, and bonds with Gavin had been severed. Grace, this house holds memories of your dad. But is it okay if I let it go? Grace gave a small nod at my murmur. Then, as if remembering something, she stood up, took my hand, and walked to the living room. The photo frame with my late husband's picture that had been in the living room was put away. So this is his true feelings. All hesitation completely vanished from within me. And embracing Grace beside me, I vowed anew to my late husband that I would never forgive those who hurt Grace. It was 5 days later at night when Gavin called Grace over and over. When he realized Grace wouldn't answer no matter how many times he called, my smartphone finally rang.
Hey! What's going on? I can't get into the house. I can't reach Grace, and it seems like the key has been changed. And there's a for sale sign out front.
He raised his voice in a panic as soon as I picked up. Of course, because the unthinkable was happening. Oh, I sold it. Why don't you all go back to your family home? Joanna has the key, right?
What? We haven't used that place in 3 years. The beds are probably all moldy and unusable.
Maybe so.
I arranged for your things to be delivered to your family home tomorrow, so why don't you stay at a hotel for tonight?
Gavin muttered uneasily, unsettled by my calm demeanor.
Wait a minute. You sold it. How could you do that on your own? Why?
I paused for a breath before answering Gavin's why.
On my own, huh? As for why I went so far as to do this, you have no idea? Huh? Don't tell me. Grace.
Gavin probably thought I was still at my parents' and didn't know about Grace.
No, that's not it. There's a reason for that.
Oh?
So there's an amazing reason you could leave Grace in that state and go on a family trip, huh? Please, Hannah. Hear me out.
No matter what the circumstances, there's no excuse for what they did to her.
I will never forgive you for hurting Grace. I'll listen to your excuses tomorrow. Wait at your family home and be prepared.
With that, I hung up. The next day, Grace and I visited the in-laws' house. It seemed their belongings had arrived, as boxes were piled up like a mountain in the room next to the entrance. Grace took off her knit hat with a wig in the entryway and glared at Gavin. Seeing the terrible state of Grace's head again, Gavin lowered his eyes. Grace. I'm really sorry. He apologized in a fading voice, but that wasn't nearly enough to settle this. Entering the house, the five of us sat facing each other at the table in the room.
Your head looks awful. That's hilarious.
Isabel pointed at Grace's head and burst out laughing, clutching her stomach.
You can't have a wedding looking like that. You probably can't even face your fiancé, huh? Don't tell me he already called off the engagement?
Unable to bear Isabel's continued laughter, I raised my voice.
Why did you do this? Were you jealous of Grace's hair? That was your reason when you were a kid, right?
When I said that, Isabel stopped laughing and glared at me.
That's right. She grew it out so long to flaunt it. It was to spite me and my curly hair, wasn't it? She provoked me, so I cut it off.
Isabel snorted as if it were only natural.
That's ridiculous. That's your reason for hacking off my hair? Are you an idiot? I only grew it out because my boyfriend said he liked it. I don't have time to waste provoking you.
At Grace's words, Isabel's face instantly turned red.
Men all like straight hair. My husband's mistress had long straight hair like you. That's why it made me even angrier. You couldn't possibly understand how I feel with my curly hair. Then, can you understand how I feel having my head shaved? If you get angry, it's okay to cut someone's hair. Mom, did you bring the clippers?
When I took the clippers out of my bag, Isabel's face quickly changed color. Grace grabbed Isabel's curly hair in her fist and turned on the clippers. Isabel screamed no and covered her hair, then lay face down on the floor and started crying.
Stop! Stop! I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was just so frustrated. I felt miserable being divorced. That's why I couldn't stand Grace being happy. I'm really sorry.
Isabel rubbed her head against the floor and begged, still lying face down. Next to her, Gavin also started apologizing.
I'm sorry. I've always felt guilty about what I did to Isabel. I hit her without even listening to her side back then. So this time I ended up wanting to take Isabel's side.
I understood Gavin's guilt, but this wasn't a matter of taking sides in the first place. However, before I could say anything, Joanna chimed in from the side.
It can't be helped since Grace isn't part of our family. Hannah is Gavin's wife, but Grace is some other man's child, you know? I still haven't forgiven you for hurting Isabel in middle school.
During the time Isabel stayed at the in-laws' house, Joanna probably sympathized with her after only hearing her side. That's exactly why she took out her resentment on me too as revenge.
Yes, we also regret what happened back then. But Isabel wasn't the only one hurt. Grace was hurt too, having her hair all cut. But you only blamed Isabel, didn't you? Didn't you feel sorry for Isabel? We reflected on that too. But Isabel was in middle school then, and Grace was only 6. Even if they were blood-related sisters, I still would have scolded her the same.
Joanna fell silent. The difference in power between Isabel and Grace back then was obvious. This time too, what Isabel and Gavin did clearly crossed the line. Surely even Joanna understood that. Once Joanna quieted down, Gavin began speaking in a trembling voice.
It hurt to watch Grace growing up to look more and more like her father. I was jealous of Grace's father. I'm not that good looking. I have curly hair and glasses. I was so anxious thinking Hannah must be remembering him through Grace.
Coming here, I understood what Joanna had been instilling in Gavin since we started living together. Joanna exploited Gavin's inferiority complex and guilt to try to isolate Grace.
I never once thought of you as a replacement for him. I thought your curly hair was cute and I loved it. Hey, didn't you say you'd love me along with my memories of him?
Gavin looked at me as if realizing, then hung his head as large tears fell. Through Gavin and Isabel's curly hair, a pitch-black darkness seemed to stretch out. In the now quiet room, I held out a sheet of paper to Gavin.
I'm divorcing you.
Gavin's eyes widened in surprise.
You're kidding. I'm sorry, I finally woke up. I really do want to attend Grace's wedding as her father. It's too late. I already told her fiancé about this. When he saw Grace's head, he said he doesn't want you at the wedding.
Grace takes my arm. Her face says it's time to go. As Grace and I stand up, Joanna hurriedly rises.
Wait a minute. What about the house? This place is too old to live in anymore. Selling the house without even discussing it with Gavin, that's definitely crazy.
I feel the waves rising again in my heart that had started to settle. Looking Joanna in the eye, I ask in a low voice.
That house was in my name, left to me by Grace's father. Joanna, you wouldn't want to live in a house built by another man, right?
Joanna's lips tremble, then she sits back down, unable to say anything. After confirming her lifeless expression, Grace and I start walking. Lastly, Grace turns around and calls out to Gavin and Isabel.
I don't intend to just cry myself to sleep over this. Huh? I called the police that day. I already consulted with them.
That's right, that day. We had called the police. The officers who came to our house told us that since it was a domestic crime, we should discuss carefully before deciding whether to file a victim report.
I thought it over, but I do intend to file a victim report with the police about both of you.
Grace declared in a cold voice, looking down on Gavin and Isabel.
Wait a minute. Please, I'm begging you. Anything but the police. Grace, please. Forgive us. I'm begging you. We're family, aren't we? We've lived together for 20 years. Even before getting married, you'll become the daughter of criminals.
My turbulent heart trembles with anger. I can't believe Gavin would bring up family at a time like this.
Don't screw with me. We lived together for 20 years, but you selfishly got jealous and terrified Grace. You're the ones who destroyed this family. As if I'd let Grace become the daughter of criminals. I'm divorcing you immediately.
Perhaps because they had never seen me yell like this, Gavin froze with his mouth open, trembling slightly.
If you truly care about us, shut up and divorce me right now. Can you really manage without me?
As if this were his last hope, Gavin stares at me with watery eyes. Like an abandoned puppy. I straighten my back and look Gavin in the eye.
I'll be fine. I'll make sure to get my fair share of assets. I have the insurance money Grace's father left, and I can sell the house. We'll manage somehow.
The three of them say nothing more. Leaving the moldy-smelling in-laws' house, I take a deep breath of fresh outside air. Grace and I look at each other, then start walking together with clear expressions. Afterwards, I went with Grace to the police station to file a victim report. Gavin and Isabel were summarily indicted for assault and fined. Even without going to prison, they now have criminal records. It seems Gavin was fired from his longtime job just before retirement age due to his criminal record. Their life ahead in the in-laws' house that needs renovating will likely be very difficult. After finalizing my divorce with Gavin, Grace and I rented a relatively cheap small apartment and moved in. Grace is holding her wedding as planned in 6 months. Gavin contacted us saying he wants to pay for the wedding expenses as compensation for Grace in the divorce settlement. But I know he doesn't have money after paying Isabel's fine too. Not wanting to jinx things by paying for the wedding with Gavin's debt, I clearly declined. Some time later, a letter of apology arrived from Isabel. In it, she wrote that she had finally realized the one tormenting her all these years was herself, obsessed with straight hair. Even knowing Grace wasn't at fault, she was still jealous of her. Thinking about how having pretty hair to unavoidably compare herself to right in front of her had tormented Isabel for so long pained my heart as a mother too. I sincerely pray that from now on, Isabel can let go of her fixation and learn to love herself. Since then, Grace has dyed her short hair a bright color. The milk tea-like hair color suits her fair skin well. A bride with a very short hairstyle might not be so bad.
Yes. No matter what hairstyle you have, you are you.
Once Grace gets married and leaves home, I plan to give up the apartment and return to my parents' house. After finishing my duties as a mother for now, I want to take care of my parents and repay them for raising me.
No matter what, I'm sure it'll be okay. Yeah. We'll manage somehow, right?
We look at each other and laugh. For now, I want to cherish the little remaining time I have with Grace as mother and daughter.